Okay, welcome. We're going to be going over coffee clay as a demo and the making of coffee clay, that is. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to talk first about the materials, then the equipment, and then after that we're going to dive right in. So the first material that we have to talk about is the PCL pellets, which are actually polycaprolactone. I know that's really hard to say, but essentially what it is it's just basically just a plastic that is very kid safe. It doesn't vent any volatile organic compounds, also known as VOCs. It basically melts at the temperature of a cup of coffee. So it's kind of ironic that we are making a thing called coffee clay, but basically it's a great material all around, especially for working with kids and kids learning how to use plastics. It's also biodegradable, so if you put it out in the backyard, it will eventually get broken down. Unlike a lot of things that they say that are biodegradable, and they actually aren't. Like PLA requires a very specific engineering-based digester and a very, very specific environment. And pretty much almost all the other plastics that you see out there are not biodegradable. There are a few, I'm not saying there aren't, but most of the stuff that you see out there on a regular basis, you have to call into question whether or not it's actually biodegradable. Polycaprolactone definitely is. There's absolutely no question about it. I've seen it firsthand. Okay, so I can vouch for it. Anyway, the second thing that we're going to need here is coffee grounds, preferably fresh. Espresso is actually not just preferable, it's really, really important that it has to be espresso grounds. So when you're, if you have a tendency, if you are a kid and you're trying to use coffee grounds from your parents and they're using a French press or something like that, that's not going to be as good as working with espresso grounds, because the difference between a French press and espresso grounds is that espresso grounds are really, really finely ground. Okay, so you're going to want to do that. You can also use hot water. PCL basically is typically done that way, but what we're going to be doing in this particular case is we're not going to work with the hot water. We're going to try and do this as simply as possible, but PCL is typically melted down with hot water at the temperature of a cup of coffee. So those are the materials. Now we're going to talk about the equipment. Okay, so one of the things that we have is a thing called silicone sheets. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a silicone baking sheet. There's several different kinds, but in this particular case, you'll see that this one's embedded, right? So you see that it's actually got something inside the silicone, right? And it actually looks like it might be fiberglass. It probably is. But basically, this fiberglass is a composite, and it makes it a little stiffer. These baking sheets are absolutely fabulous for it. We'll provide a link of a place where you can get them, but you can also find them, inside the stores. You don't necessarily have to find them online. You can usually find them in stores. I like to find them up in the Northeast. You can find them at Ocean State job lots all the time. It's really, really easy. They cost about $10 a piece each. They're not expensive, but you can get them. I think you can get them on Amazon in like a twin pair, and it might be even a little bit cheaper that way. So anyway, so that's one of the things. Then you're also going to need a heat plate. So let me show you what heat plate we're talking about here. And this thing is pretty humble. So yeah, doesn't exactly look like something state of the art here, and it's not. This is probably came from something like in the 1970s, maybe early 1980s is when this came from. I got this off at some at a Salvation Army, and it probably cost me about somewhere around $10. Maybe it was $12 at most. But basically, you can find these things all over the place, and these things are great for this particular project. But they're very, very necessary. You must have a heat plate. Okay, if you're not going to do that, I might be able to figure out another way to do it that, to make coffee clay that doesn't include this. But I think it's probably going to take a little bit of extra effort in order to try and figure that out. So let's just work with it. The way we're going to work with it this time is we're going to use the heat plate. Okay, so now we're going to talk really, really briefly about the other optional hardware that you can use. Okay, so one of them would be to use a heat gun. Okay, so a heat gun basically is like a miniaturized hairdryer, and you could use a hairdryer as well. Hairdryer will work just as well as a heat gun, and a hairdryer works just fine. And in some cases, it might actually be preferable. But basically, one of the things that's nice about a heat gun is you see how small that nozzle is compared to like a hair dryer, well, that allows you to target a particular spot, and that's actually quite useful for that. We can put down links for how much it costs to get a heat gun. Most heat guns are not exactly what you call expensive. They're not a high ticket item, but that's an option. You can also I oftentimes usually have people working, when they're working with PCL, I have them typically bamboo chopsticks, right? These aren't bamboo chopsticks, but here we go. There's a bamboo chopstick right there. Okay. Now you would need 2 of these if you were going to use it, but basically the idea is you would have a pair of bamboo chopsticks, just like this one, and that would actually do a fine job of just sitting there and showing, basically being able to manipulate the PCL if you needed to. Okay. Glass bowl or ceramic bowl. Ceramic bowl basically is, just like, how like you have, your typical ceramic mug. You have like a mug. Well, ceramic bowl, same thing, basically made of the same materials. So you can use that to put PCL in. The thing is that it needs to be something that is glass lined so that the PCL doesn't permanently adhere to it. And that's what you want to avoid. Another option that you have, if you want to take it in consideration, is a silicone bowl, if you can find them. Silicone bowls are great. There's no way that the PCL is going to stick to it at all. It's absolutely fabulous, but they're hard to get a hold of. I got lucky and I found one that I got for free. But if you can find a silicone bowl, and if I find a good resource online where you can purchase one, I will definitely recommend that as well. Okay, so then there's also the boilers. This is, sitting there in boiling water. Keurigs are actually absolutely fabulous at this because it's pretty much instant. And it's one of the things I like the most about it. You could also use a microwave. You could use a, like your typical pot, that you put on a burner, or you could use a tea boiler, which I use a lot. So you could definitely consider doing that. All right, and then the other thing too is that you might decide, and I'll give you some examples here. You might have a particular shape in mind for the coffee clay sheet that you're going to be creating, and so you might want to use something to use as a shaping tool. I have this basically cut up from a bamboo cutting board, and I basically use this to shape exactly how I want the coffee clay to look before it's finished. And sometimes that can be really helpful and save you a step in your process. So essentially that's it for now. And our next piece of the puzzle is to actually sit there and go through and get this coffee clay started. Just in case you want to see it, this is PCL, polycaprolactone. See, there's little things. And then of course here is espresso, basically used espresso beans. That's it. That's ground up espresso beans. Okay. And so in this next video, we're going to sit there and tackle out how you actually make the coffee clay. See you soon.